Hey, BC with Combustion Monkey here. Thanks for joining me during these crazy COVID times. So we have our 1967 Bonneville here, and I just wanted to make a quick video to help you kind of understand how to explore electrical issues as it pertains to, you know, turn signals, brake lights, things like that. So I'm going to do my best to quickly run through kind of my thought process on testing to figure out why the left rear turn signals wouldn't work, why the left rear brake lights wouldn't work, but the left rear running lights would work, and everything else on the right side would work just fine. So hopefully this helps you out. Hopefully it helps you figure out what's going on with yours. I'd love to see any comments from you, and I'll try to help you as best as I can. I'm not an expert by any means. So, you know, if you're not good with this stuff, probably don't want to dig into it. But if you're decent and you can get yourself somewhat familiar with the situation like I have, I think, you know, you can save yourself some time and some money and hopefully get your problems fixed. So here we go. Okay, so it is a bit of a mess in here because I haven't put everything back how I want it, just because I wanted to kind of show you what I've done here. So first thing you want to do is identify the fuse box. And the fuse box is going to obviously read a bunch of different things. In this case, we're looking at the one here that is for directional signals. If you have power there, then you can kind of move on to the next step. If you don't, then you need to figure out why you don't have power there, because that's where the power should start. So basically just take the multimeter that you have, put it on volts, 12 volts, and hit one side with the red, hit this with, or your ground, with the black side, the black lead. A lot of times I use this screw hole because it had a good ground to the frame. You can use any of these bolts. Really anything that is touching the frame or any metal that's on the frame should work. So I found that I did have power here. And again, you need to start by having power here and making sure that you get power to where it needs to go. Something else that needs to be said, you know, when I first looked at this fuse box, I was like, my gosh, it's all the way up there and it's stuck to the friggin' firewall. I can't tell what's feeding it, what's in there, what's not connected. I thought I was screwed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to replace this whole fuse box if I start digging into it. Sure enough, I didn't know it, but each fuse box is held on by either a screw right in the middle or a couple of bolts. In this case, it was 2 bolts, similar to this here. Basically was able to take those 2 bolts out and pull that fuse box right out. That helped me see exactly how everything was connected. So just keep that in mind. So assuming you have power at the fuse, move on to the next step. If you only have power on one side of the fuse, then you need to replace the fuse. If you don't have power at all at the fuse on either side, then you have a problem with the wire that feeds the fuse box, and you're going to need to check behind the fuse box to see where that wire goes. So the next thing you're going to want to do is kind of inspect the wiring. Now you'll see the wiring comes through there, right here, kind of goes up in through that area, over to here, and then it splits off for the left side. It then continues on, and you'll see that it goes all the way to the right side. Now the ones that you see down here in the trunk floor, those are going to go to the reverse lights. Those worked just fine. The reason you have 2 wires here and 3 wires here and 1 wire here, basically 1 wire means you only have 1 light filament. So in this case, it's just going to be the running light. This isn't going to be your turn signals or brake lights. So this is, if you turn your lights on, this is on, right? Now these, on the other hand, these 2, they have multiple wires. Now what you see here is, you notice this is a brown wire here. You're going to see there's a brown wire on this, right? And then there's a brown wire coming into here. So the brown wires, we can assume, are going to be your running lights. So when I turned on the lights, headlights, these would all power up and I'd get lights to turn on here, here, and here, because each of them have a running light. Now, this is how a light bulb looks when it has double filament. Hopefully you can see this. You see that? You can kind of see 2 different filaments in there. So one is for the running lights, one is for brake and hazard, and turn signals. So that leaves this yellow wire as the turn signal, brake light, and so forth. So we have the wire that comes in, goes into this bulb. We then have this bulb feeding the power to go to the next bulb. You'll notice on this side we actually have a green wire and a brown wire. So again, the brown is going to be your running lights. The green is going to be flashers, brake lights, and hazard. But you want to go in and you want to take these out and make sure that the bulbs are the correct bulbs, first of all. And these metal tabs here are how they ground. There isn't actually a ground wire that goes to these. They simply touch the metal housing of the light housing, and that grounds them. So if they don't have a good ground, that could also be your issue. So I would check all of your grounds, and if you need to, you can run a separate ground, basically by leaving this out, maybe connecting alligator clips or something to this metal tab and then going to one of these bolts, right? That would be an acceptable ground. All right, so if you've gone through and you've checked all the bulbs to make sure that they're the correct bulbs called for by factory, mine were 1156s and 1157s, and you know that they're correct, then you've checked all the grounds, making sure that all the grounds are effectively working. Then what you need to do is look through all the wiring to make sure you don't have any cut or visibly damaged wiring in any of the spots that you know the wiring's at, whether it's under the dash, in the trunk, or even under the back seat. If all that looks good, then you may be dealing with a grounded wire somewhere that isn't visible. It may be causing a short or something along those lines. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to walk you through running a wire directly from the steering column all the way back to the rear turn signal wire, so that we bypass all that wiring that we can't see to see if there's a problem. So here goes. I would recommend getting a Climbers or a Chilton's or whatever it is for your car. Make sure you get a wiring diagram, because you need to know what each of these colors is. Now in my case, it kind of works out because back there I saw yellow, and I have yellow coming out of my steering column. Now what you can do at this point is you can turn the turn signal on and test the yellow line to see if it's actually getting power through the wire. In my case, it was not. It was getting very low voltage to the clicker when I turned on the left turn signal, which told me there was some sort of a ground that was shorting everything out. When you turn the right signal on, you get 12 volts, 12 volts, 12 volts, 12 volts. When I turned on the left signal, it would go to like 4 volts. So I knew something was draining the power. So what I did then, obviously test the power on the, if you get power here, then you can test power on whatever color it is that goes to your light. If you don't have power there, then you kind of have a pretty good idea that there's a drain somewhere. Typically your flasher won't work if there's a drain, so you can kind of think of it that way. If your tail lights work, but your turn signal back there, your brake light back there, and your flashers back there don't work, then that set of filaments is not working. The yellow wire is not giving power to those items. So what I did is I wanted to figure out if the power, or if the issue was somewhere in the steering column or in the fuse box, or I wanted to know if it was beyond there as it travels up and then goes under the frame and then back to those lights. So I went ahead and I cut that wire. I then took and I ran my own wire all the way through that I know was good, all the way back into the trunk, and I tied it directly in to the yellow wire back here. Now obviously that leaves this wire to go all the way back through here, all the way back up into the dash, and that's where you saw it cut on the other side of the steering column. So basically from this point, now I have my steering column directly powering this yellow wire, and sure enough, when I turned on the left signal, brake lights, anything, it worked. So what that tells me is that from here, through all these wires here, going all the way through under the floor, it then goes under the dash, and then to here, somewhere in between there and back in where I just showed you, is a problem. So what I'm going to do now, obviously I could go back and I could try to figure out exactly where that's at, but it actually goes under this carpet. There's a little channel, and I can show you that. Basically, there's a little channel here. You see this? This is the wire. Channel goes down, and boom, it goes under the floor. Very difficult to pull that out, to change it, to check what's in there, because it's obviously not that accessible. So I just decided to run my own wire. Obviously, I ran it for testing purposes, and it worked. But now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run it under the carpet. So, all in all, I really hope this helps. I know overall electrical issues can be a little bit challenging, but if you kind of understand the steps that need to be taken, you can typically figure almost anything out when it comes to electricals. It can be very daunting, don't get me wrong. But again, if you get that wiring diagram and you kind of start at the fuse box, you then look at the wiring diagram and see where that fuse feeds, which was this next. And then you can see that this went up to the column, and then the column was actually feeding power to each of those, tail lights. Then you kind of know how it works. So you can work your way all the way back to the lights and see where the problem exists. So again, I know this could be very confusing if this is kind of the first dip into electrical problems. Hopefully it helped a little bit. I want to kind of give you the flow. Basically, the cool thing about cars is they're 12 volts. It's not like working on a house's electrical system. So you basically have one wire that's going all the way back there, and then it's grounding at the light. You don't have like a house where you have a common, where you have to run multiple wires to one outlet for it to work. In this case, you literally have one wire. Basically, power starts there, it goes up, comes to this flasher, then goes up into this steering column, and then feeds each of those turn signals. You have one wire to worry about. So if both of your turn signals were out, you'd probably think something was going on here, because then, it's not feeding power to your switch. Or you'd think that it's probably going to be in your fuse box, because obviously, if you're not getting power anywhere, then nothing's going to work properly. If just your running lights were working, same thing. This is worrying about flash. It's not worrying about running lights. Running lights are separate. So again, if you have questions, I'd love to help you. Obviously, it's difficult for me to help you on every car, just because every car is very different as far as the wiring diagram, the colors of the wires, things like that. But if you just take your time and you kind of go through and understand exactly what's being fed and where with that wiring diagram, I think you'll be in pretty good shape. So again, hopefully this helped you out. If you have any questions, please leave a comment, and I'll do my best to answer you. Best of luck with your problem, and stay safe out there. Just as a quick side note, for years I had just done the basic splice with like electrical tape, so you end up with a bunch of electrical tape all in your wires, and you may have noticed that nice little setup there. Just wanted to give you a quick rundown on how to do that. So basically, you need to get the wire, you need to strip it, you then get these connectors, place it over. I'll do that here. So you then place that on top of the stripped wire. You then get yourself a nice wire crimper, and make sure you buy good plastic components. These red ones, they're a little bit more expensive than the others, but they make a difference. So then you go ahead and just squeeze it, it clips, and you're done. I mean, that's stronger than any splice would be, that's for sure. Then we'll do it to the other side. Alright, other side's done. So like I said, super strong. You can pull them apart, ain't gonna come apart. Super easy way to do it. You can top that off with tape if you're worried about it being in the weather. In this case, it's gonna be inside, so not really worried about it. But yeah, just wanted to give you that quick tip. It kind of changed my life as it pertains to splicing wires, made it super simple. You can splice one of these in 10 seconds. I mean, it's that quick. So hope that helped you.